Oh, we have a bunch of people online, so I guess can I get started? Well, thanks for joining. Just more people trickle in, that'd be great. If more people join online, that's great too. So it's nice to meet you all. My name is Mike Trachtenberg. I'm the CTO for Data Systems. Thanks for coming. Thanks for the people online. Can the people online hear?
They may be muted.
It's not muted. It would be.
No, on their side.
Oh, yeah. If yeah, can you guys hear us on the web? Someone's typing.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, so today we're going to focus on a few different things. But the main purpose is we want to highlight what we're doing with backup with regards to Office 365 and Microsoft services in Azure, and then how does Veeam enable additional capabilities beyond what you get out of the box with Microsoft, right? So we'll do some demos for that on the Veeam side and kind of walk through backup, disaster recovery strategies from a Microsoft sole perspective, and then from a enhancement with Veeam perspective as well. So just for introductions again, my name is Mike Trachtenberg. I'm the CTO. We have a few other people from MDS, from our marketing department, Jara and Jen, and we have Eric from Veeam.
Hi, yeah, Eric Doherty from Veeam. I'm a technical partner manager, which means that I work with partners to help them with training and enablement, bring them up to speed so they can come out and help you with your Veeam deployments as we grow the business continually.
All right. So just really quickly, I'm going to run through, and we'll keep this part brief. Just who are MDS, what do we do, that type of thing. So we're Marine Data Systems. That's what MDS stands for. We're founded in 1992. We're an own business by Maureen and Stuart Landy. We're headquartered in New York. We have offices in other regions with 70-plus people, and we focus on Microsoft, Veeam, Cisco, Dell, HP, a whole host of other technology providers. We're a system integrator, or VARs. You can think of us like that. We also have managed services. We try to do everything from a full lifecycle of technology implementations, from business development all the way through managed services. We're broken up into four main practice areas where we do infrastructure, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Productivity and applications, where we have people that focus on things like Office 365 and SharePoint and workflow and business analytics. Into security and identity, a specific group of people that's dedicated to compliance and security enhancements, technology associated with that, and then lastly, managed services. And just if you were curious about like a whole list or a laundry list of all the items that we do in those practices broken down, we have a tremendous amount of value that we could provide to organizations. Typically, when we're engaging with people, we like to understand your business, understand what you're trying to accomplish, align technological solutions to those business initiatives, implement them, and then provide maintenance management, and then help you to reassess and develop those technology components further over the coming weeks and months and so on. We have a whole list of marketing events. You can visit our website. This is obviously a code-delivered one with the team, but we do a whole host of other ones, in-person webinars, going over specific items. Like the next event we're going to be doing is around New York DFS, which is going to be in about a month from now. We have all different clients representing all different verticals, as well as governmental business that we do as well. And some of our top partners are listed there. We've received awards from Cisco, Microsoft, other alliances or trust organizations like TrustX. So definitely well recognized for our efforts. And one other part that differentiates us is that our ability to not just implement all these technologies, but to do it with a look to be a charitable. Right? So a charity plays a big part of our organization, and we do a number of different charity events and participate in a number of charities. Actually, I'll start. And then we have just some contact information. So I don't want to spend too much time on that, but at least to give you a little overview of who MDS is, of who we are, and what we do. So I'm going to dive now into Office 365 backups, right? So the way that the rest of this webinar / in-person event is going to work is we're going to highlight from an Office 365 perspective what is your backup retention policy or tools from a Microsoft perspective, and then Veeam will do a presentation on how they augment that and take it further. So just for some other housekeeping items, so that's the way that so it's going to be a back and forth, Office 365, and then Veeam with Office 365, then we're going to do Azure, and then Veeam with Azure. All right. Also, for anyone that's remote, we're going to send out surveys for people here. You have some surveys that you could fill out. Let us know. So one quick question, since you guys using Office 365? Yeah. On mail? Using Office 365?
No.
No. Okay. So are you doing anything supplemental for backup or retention or archiving? What are you using?
Backupify? Backupify?
Backupify. Okay. And you're doing just mail, or are you using it for other pieces as well?
SharePoint and OneDrive.
Okay.
All three.
All right. So so you're familiar with third-party portions, right? So this you'll get an idea of how Veeam can be different then, right? And you're using Exchange Online, or no, you're not using Office 365. You have Exchange Online.
So to be honest with you, so I'm with Community Board 12 of Manhattan, and my purpose in being here is to see what's out there, to see what can be implemented. So there's a lot of things that are managed by Do It. So I'm not completely familiar with all the parts. I'm actually supposed to have training with their office soon. But we also want to expand a lot of what we do in-house, and so we're probably going to need to implement our own backup system.
So with Do It and with other government, those global agencies, you have a communal Office 365 system with a communal tenant as well, with services that they manage. And something like, this type of third-party backup solution, you would have access to provide additional backup capabilities within that tenant, right? So if you wanted to target specific people and specific users, obviously you'd have to work with them to set that up, but then you could do that. So you could basically hold your own backups, but they'll get into that. So just from a I guess sorry about this, from a traditional standpoint, right? Back with Exchange on-prem, the idea was, you would journal to an archiving system, and whether that was then stored on-prem or in the cloud, there was a way in which you would basically say that, these, mailboxes or databases would be journaled, and then copies of those messages would be stored at a secondary location, right? So they'd had a number of challenges, right? One of the ones that's actually not even listed here is it also proved to be a compliance challenge with regards to encryption. If an encrypted message is journaled, the encrypted message is encrypted in the journaled copy, and therefore you would have a problem with regulatory compliance. So that's one that isn't listed here, but there is time and energy and a whole bunch of issues there. So Microsoft then changed a number of items around, and when they looked at, okay, as people start to move to the cloud, what are strategies for people to use backups inside of Office 365 or in the cloud in general, right? So okay, you have mail on-prem, file servers on-prem, you have all this stuff on-prem. Let's move all of those things into the cloud. Obviously, Microsoft is doing that in order to make people more productive. Having all the content in that location, you could build integrations into items, right? And Office 365 becomes this hub for you to be able to apply unified policy, unified compliance strategies across all of your content, right? So this way, if you think of something like a mail message and a Word document, right? Those two things, if they're both inside of Microsoft's cloud network, they could have the same strategy put on those two things, so they're two totally different independent items. Right? A traditional on-premise environment, your file server and your mail act independently. You would have backup systems for both of those. You would have a system for compliance for both of those items. But the idea now becomes you put files, content, communications, emails, all those things inside of Office 365, and then you have one set of policies to do things like retention, search, and compliance for content. So that's Microsoft's idea. A lot of organizations do think that it is a good idea. I think it works very well. Typically, it becomes a little bit more problematic if you're have like one foot on each side, right, where you have some things inside of Office 365 and some things not. But when you do adopt Office 365 and you put all those content into those locations, you do reap the benefits of that. But then the question is, it's like, okay, if I have all these pieces inside of Office 365, how do I back those things up? How do I search against them? How do I do those things? So Microsoft does give you a lot of tools to do that. The first thing is the idea of when you move your content in Office 365, you own that content. There is no way to then say, okay, I want to take this, this message, and I want to have a backup that then goes somewhere else. Right? Everything is driven by importing it to Office 365, which there's lots of ways to do that, to ingest that data, and then putting these retention policies or to manage it or to use archives for this content and for it to all be done that way. Now, Microsoft does that on purpose, and its theory behind doing that is that your data that resides in Office 365, you're in control of it, and if your corporate policy is to have all of that data deleted after 30 days, they're going to do everything to get it off their system, right? So there's no traditional backup methodology inside of Office 365. And their thought is you bring it in, you put in retention policies, you put in policies that go across all the data, that applies to all of the data, and then from there, retention, backup, archive, all that happens based upon those policies that you put in place. Okay. The theory also is that you would have this done automatically and easily, right? So you can do things that say any message, any email message that is sent from one user to another that has a certain keyword, that is from certain people, that is part of a certain group, those things get specific tags or classified with specific tags. Or if someone enters in specific content to a Word document in SharePoint or OneDrive, once you've moved it there, anything that hits that filter also is going to get that specific tag put on it. And then with that tag associated with those specific pieces of content, those things are then going to have the correct policy applied to them. This is Microsoft's strategy for about the last year and a half, right? Between classifications, tags, using this unified method of data retention. Obviously, a big part of that is based off of GDPR and other global regulatory requirements that are coming out. Besides GDPR, other states in the U.S., everyone is coming out with their own policy. So now it's like, okay, you create a policy to look for certain specific pieces of content, whether it's in OneDrive or SharePoint or Mail. That piece of content is automatically classified, and then that retention policy gets aligned to that policy. And that's pretty much how you have to develop your backup strategy for Office 365. Okay. And it's fairly easy to make these classifications apply, right? It has built-in ones. You can build your own. Some of them in that are there are I want to say nominally, right? Like they have ones for identifying social security numbers, which everyone is like, oh, that's great, right? Or identifying credit card numbers. But if you actually try to use it, like the format is kind of funky. Like it has to say like SN number in order for it to find it. So you have to make your own. It is something that you do have to muck around with. it's not as fluid as it needs to be, but all the tools are there for you to customize it, right? So you could really literally find everyone's content and or everyone's content that they're producing with those types of keywords or et cetera, and have them automatically classified. So so the tools are there, you could use them. And the policies, they're fairly intelligent too. But like I said, sometimes there's some syntax items that you need to get past, right? Some of the built-in ones, not only just the classification piece, but when new content is created, they can kick in, and the policies can take effect automatically for content that is being generated on the fly, right? So like you can see here, it's saying like find content in your org that contains healthcare related to HIPAA classifications, right? And again, those are based off of Microsoft's definition of that. So if someone creates a Word document or uploads a Word document into their OneDrive, it's going to trigger that. That classification is going to get put on that content. The correct retention policy is automatically put on there. If they delete that piece of content, it will be retained inside of Microsoft systems. And that's just how it works with them, right? So the idea moves away from just like, okay, people accidentally deleting files to everything is policy driven. This doesn't help with the idea of people doing accidental deletions or people wanting to go back and look at older versions of things. That's not really what Microsoft Systems is built to do. It's all about facilitating policy-driven, enacting backups, retention, and archives, right? So if you wanted to do that preservation piece, right, you can do, there are some manual things you can do, right? You can do in-place archiving. What historically people have done is use the third column there, which is hold, right, which is just basically I'm going to put everyone on legal hold, and therefore that will solve my problems. You could do that, right? I think people still do that to this day. And basically then if someone deletes anything, you could always do an e-discovery against it to do restore. So it's been a very common practice. But you know, I think Microsoft is really pushing people more towards the idea of you know, set up a governing policy. If you're going to accept deletion of mail off of 60 days, allow that to happen, but have the correct classifications in place so that the correct data is retained and backed up. Right. So this is, you know, overall Microsoft general methodology, and then obviously the idea is have archiving policies so that anything that's older than X whatever days will automatically move to Office 365 archives. So when we're talking about that type of methodology, right, with Microsoft, so Microsoft is going to obviously handle legal hold and the retention pieces. But let's say we get into or more of user function-based items, right? User deletes something and they want to get it back, right? It's more of your responsibility. And when we get into that other area, this is where Microsoft either makes you lean on yourself, right? Like you have to back it up through some manual process, or you could have like some components with like versioning in SharePoint or OneDrive. But in general, you have to come up with a system to do it, and sometimes it's either an internal system, or other times it's a secondary product, right? And that's where Veeam comes into play and where they can assist. So this is where when we get into that shared responsibility model, where Veeam can help out. So we'll transition now to the next part, which is where Veeam can assist with those types of backups and retrieval.
So just one moment while we transition over to my computer. So, you know, we just heard a lot of great ideas of how Microsoft recommends you take care and manage and curate your own data within Microsoft Office. Part of the key to that, in my eyes, is it's all within Microsoft Office. So if you're comfortable with everything always being just in Microsoft Office, maybe that's a good solution for you. You also only have the granularity and the level of access to it that Microsoft is providing to you. So we've just reviewed the same slide. This is our nice little transition point here. So, you know, if you've ever been to or watched a Microsoft presentation on Office 365 or Azure, any of their cloud platforms, they stress multiple times, it's your data. And that's a good thing, the way that they're presenting it there, because it means they're not in there tinkering with your private data. The downside of that is it's your data. We're not going to back it up for you. We're not taking care of it. If you mess it up, it's your data. As it's, the cynic looks at it and says, it's not our problem, but somebody has to be able to take care of it, and that somebody is you. So as we look at this, what are the risks if you don't have a true backup outside of the Office 365 environment for these for your data? You're limiting the access to, like I said, what they are going to make available to you and how they're going to make it available to you. So they change the way that you can view that data, the way you can search that data, you're beholden to that. There are gaps unless you go for the top tiers of services for Office 365. There's potential for gaps in that data availability. Security vulnerabilities are huge. There's something new every day. Obviously, anybody who looks at any sort of, I'm sure everybody gets some sort of an update into their inbox to make sure that you're up on top of whatever is malware, ransomware, all kinds of terrible things out there. And the regulatory exposure, which we just reviewed a lot of that in depth. But I will say that having done it, it's a good process, but it can be daunting to look at and be like, how am I going to do my data governance on this? So now you have another way of worrying about making sure that long-term, how can you hold this data while possibly saving yourself some money and doing it in a way that you may already be used to as somebody who's using backup software today.
Yeah, a lot of times that is all front-loaded work also, right? Like if organization has to have all those policies, as I mentioned, defined and written, and then you can go in and start to apply that stuff in Office 365. And if you don't have that information, then a lot of times it's a blocker. Well, then how could I even set my retention policies to go in line with policies that I don't have written out? And then you kind of get into this stuck pattern, and without then some other form of backup, you feel like, okay, well then I'm not compliant and I don't have policies and I've got no way to back it up.
Yep. Exactly. Policies are policies. Policies don't save data. Policies are written documents. So why back up? Just to extend on this, one of the top ones, I won't say the number one, but majority of issues that restore is needed for email have to do with the 10 little things on the ends of your hands. People fat finger documents. They accidentally delete. They corrupt. Who knows what they do? Sometimes the calls I'm sure you've gotten. How did you even accomplish this? I couldn't recreate this if I was being challenged to. The security of, we're going to look at, why is it such a risk given the way that Office 365 is set up of any sort of malicious phishing emails or ransomware that's in there. So looking at this, we talk about the retention policies that you can build within Microsoft Office. So standard out of the box Microsoft Office has their archiving platform set. You can set it up so that after 2 years it can move to an archive. Your deleted items stay for 30 days. After that, if you have no other policy for managing it, your deleted items in the recycle bin are permanently deleted to keep your mailbox size down. Auto archives, if you have that set up, moves everything to archive as long as it's been somehow captured. Sometimes in some of the old ways that things have been done, if somebody gets something in and deletes it before it's been archived, it's gone. You can get it. You can delete it before it's a policy, before any sort of an archive policy has been applied to it. It's harder to do the way they have things set up today, but it's actually still possible. SharePoint sites, same deal. You have 3 months if you delete content out of SharePoint sites or the entire SharePoint site itself. OneDrive for Business, same thing. You've got 90 days because basically the engine for OneDrive for Business is SharePoint, so it's going to follow the same cues there. Employee leaving the company, and this is an interesting one because the way it's built, when you deactivate a user and they leave the company, their manager gets a message typically that says you have 30 days to go through this person's data to figure out what you need. Well, how do you know in 30 days what you may need 6 months from now? So is this person supposed to just take all this stuff and just copy the entire OneDrive into their OneDrive and then just, the mounds of some of it's necessary, some of it's not. But now they're just collecting junk as they go. And if this manager, maybe it's unfortunately someplace where there's high turnover and they're doing this 3 times a month, all of a sudden you're going to start having a lot of data in one person's OneDrive, but the rest of the company doesn't know about it. Then that manager leaves and it continues on. How are you tracking that data? How do you know what's where? So here's an interesting thing for you. I usually ask this as a quiz question before I bring it up, but I didn't today. When somebody infiltrates your network from, compromised accounts, placing some sort of dormant malware or ransomware in your network, it's typically there 140 days before you recognize that it's there. So looking at this graphic, you see where that line lands on a lot of the ways that Office 365 is set up. It's deeply into the red. If you have a problem and you need to recover, the standard ways within Office 365 may not be able to help you. So that's going to give you a lot of gap there where you're going to lose data, people are going to have to start over, or hope that they can find, in the case of email, who did they email that data to? Hopefully they can get that back. None of this that I'm describing is an efficient way to try and run your backup and recovery systems. So we put this into Veeam Backup for Office 365. So what exactly do we do? We protect it from day one. So now you have the ability, and you can set the frequency of how often it's backed up and what is backed up and who is backed up, all across Exchange, SharePoint, and OneDrive for Business. So this gives you the opportunity under one management console as well, which is a huge thing to say, because when you go into Office 365 to manage a lot of these backup and recovery features in Office 365, it's Exchange admin, it's SharePoint admin, it's OneDrive for Business. There's a lot of different places that you need to set up things and recovery from. Now we're bringing this all into one window where you can manage all of these components simultaneously. So our Veeam Backup for Office 365, which is a product that's been out for a few years now, version 2 just released back in July. So it's a well-featured, mature product that we're continuing to develop upon as well. So what does it give you? It gives you, like we said, the Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive for Business backup. The nice thing is the restore. Where do you want to store this data? Not restore, store the data. So you could put this data in Azure. You could put it on back to prem. I've talked to many customers over the years who their biggest fear of going to cloud is, now I don't have a copy of the data anywhere. What if I want to leave? Well, here's your copy of your data that you can put anywhere you want. You could go to cross cloud services, same cloud services, back to storage accounts, storage systems back in your main data center if you still have an on-prem data center. It's scalable. You can scale this to multiple jobs, multiple accounts, multiple storage instances, and it's fully API supported. So setting it up is pretty easy. You can be set up and running in the basics in a few minutes. So for recovery, you can directly restore it back into the account that the data came from. You could restore it to a third party. There's ways you can restore it. So you could restore it back to email, back to original location. You could save it out as files and put those on file shares if needed. SharePoint Online is very flexible in the items and components that you can do. You can do full site restore or down to the individual items. OneDrive for Business, same thing, folders, entire OneDrive, documents, and there's searchability for e-discovery like we were talking about with the Microsoft components as well. So you can do e-discovery search across multiple mailboxes. So for what it provides, it's actually a very, I'm always amazed when I actually see what it costs. It's such a small uptick compared to what you get in the cost for a monthly Office 365 license. But what it does is, when you see how simple this is to run, you're going to realize the value of getting everything under one umbrella here. the simplicity of it, again, from the help desk components to be able to now put this back in the hands of perhaps your backup administrators as opposed to your Office 365 administrators. It's going to simplify your backup and restore processes and your support processes significantly. Also, if you already have folks that are familiar with Veeam, this is going to be familiar to them as well, but it's not going to take them long to figure out how to install, configure, and maintain this platform. When you, again, more on flexibility, as these products mature, you're going to see more and more integration across our Veeam platform with it. The engine is the same engine concept that we use in our main Veeam Backup and Recovery platform. So it's a multi-year proven platform that just happens to, over the last few years, been built to address a specific need for data that's not on-prem. Flexibility, the other thing that's very interesting with that is this is not a cloud-only solution. So if you're still running a hybrid solution where you still have a few mailboxes or a couple mail servers on-prem, and then a bulk of users, I've seen that many times where field sales may have Office 365 accounts, but the corporate folks still have an on-prem exchange. You can back up both within this one solution. So you're not running from platform to platform trying to figure out what you need to do to support users within those two different platforms. So now I'm going to do a quick demo for you of how, hopefully, there it is, good. I have so many windows open to do presentations today that I always need to make sure I pick the right one. So in the room, I know let me just expand this as large as I can. I hope that's a little easier to see. It's not the greatest, it's a little small. Hopefully on the folks that are remote can see this pretty well as well. So this is a job I have set up to a demo Office 365 organization. First thing that I'll do is walk you through what it looks like to add an organization to this. It's very simple to add your email and your Office 365 and your on-prem systems. So you could do one, the other, or both within this. So for now, we're just going to focus on the Office 365 component because I don't have an Exchange system. For most people, selecting an Office 365 region is going to be the default. If we're sitting here in the United States, unless you're a Fed customer, it's going to be the default public organization. Here you would just put in, I'm just going to step you through what it looks like. This is basically the steps that I did to get this up and running within my, long domain name. Takes me a second to type. I can't type and think at the same time. So ahead of time, you would have to set up this account with some special permissions that are outlined in a nice, setup document that's available for Veeam Backup for Office 365. It doesn't take long to get those set up. You just follow the process, set up those accounts within Office 365 to have the proper permissions. We're going to just disconnect, not use that Microsoft Graph because it throws errors occasionally. It's going to go through checks to make sure that it has the permissions needed to connect to this organization. I'm going to cheat because I know this account will work. And can't type. Bear with me for a second. There we go. So what it's doing is making sure that this account, which I sort of use this in the first place because I know it has the proper authority to connect to mailboxes. There's certain attributes you need to give to that account so that it has the ability to read the mailboxes in order to back up the data. Because by default, users, admins don't have access across mailboxes. This doesn't mean this account you could use it then to log in and sit at a console and read all the email. But as a backup admin, you have the ability to do so anyway, because you'll be able to see in a moment where I can pull out emails as I need to. So what I'm going to cancel this because this is actually just setting up the organization. That's all it takes to get an organization set up, which is what you're seeing here. So the steps we took are what it takes to get this CyberDoherty demo1.onmicrosoft.com set up. So from in here, we can set up a backup job. I can't hit backup, okay. We're going to go ahead and just, we'll step through what it takes to back up an organization. So we could back up the entire organization, which is quite, nothing wrong with doing that, but there's probably a lot of mailboxes in there that don't hold anything of value that you don't need to get information from, resource mailboxes, room mailboxes. Plus, you don't have to license an entire organization.
What's the maximum size for the whole organization you can back up?
There's not.
There isn't any?
No.
So
That's what besides the office.
where you're downloading it to?
Well, that's what's going to limit it, your storage.
Right, exactly. So, my self-directing is back up to specific cloud.
You could back up to something in the cloud, but this doesn't connect directly to object storage, say. Mm-hmm. So wherever you do it, you would still have to be configured. I'm actually running this demo right now from Azure.
Okay.
Excuse me. So you could configure disks to connect to this this machine that I'm running from to store those backups. The other thing is, yes, you're going to have to sit there and do some mapping and say, okay, I need to break it up depending on the size of the disk, because you want to have breakup jobs possibly by the size. If you want to keep them under a certain size for a disk.
No, when you're backing up, you said the whole organization. It can be anywhere from any PC, desktop, whatever. It doesn't include, let's say, I have a rack or so in a hybrid network.
No, this would just be, in this case, because this is an Office 365 only organization, it would only be the Office 365 mailboxes. In the hybrid, yes, you have the choice to pull in from the on-prem mailboxes as well. Folks, if you have any questions, the folks that are dialed in, can you please type them into the IM window in the meeting, and we'll be sure to get those shared around here so that we can get them answered. So I think in most cases you're not going to, the other thing is you can separate it out by the types of things you want to do. So you could do mailbox users, you could do sites, you could do, like we said, the entire organization or multiple organizations. I'm just going to pull out users to back up here.
Do you license by user?
License by user. So you don't have to license the entire org. So say that you just wanted to do your executive team, just license for your executive team or whoever you deem most important to send an email for. So in this case, I could, again, pick and choose who out of these users I want to do backups for. I could also go back in and pull out any sort of SharePoint or SharePoint sites that I would want to add in there as well. I'm not going to add any right now. I'm not going to run this anyway. I have the option to exclude items, so I could say the entire organization except for a certain group of users. So maybe say entire org. There's a question online.
Yeah, I'm still muted, so you may have to repeat, but do mailbox backups include contacts, calendars, etc.? Also, can you back up shared mailboxes?
Yes, to all of those. So the question was, does the backup include all items in a mailbox, meaning contact items, calendar items, mail, etc.? Any of the categories? The answer is yes. And can it do shared mailboxes? Yes.
Also, Matt Ward asked, what about online archives? Will those also be backed up in addition to the user mailbox?
The archives, I would have to double check, but once it's out of the mailbox, I don't believe that we're picking it up. So it have to be backed up by at the inbox in order to be pulled in. I don't believe we're pulling in the long-term archive from Office 365. And unfortunately, the mailboxes that I'm using today haven't been around long enough to have an archive that I could test that with for you. So to continue on with our demo, as part of the backup, you need a backup proxy, which is the server that's actually going to do the work for the Office 365 backup. If you're familiar with the Veeam architecture, there's always a Veeam server, there are proxies, and there are repositories. So in the case of this configuration for Veeam Backup for Office 365, I'm doing it all from one server. You could have different servers meet all these different needs if need be. So for right now, I'm keeping these at the defaults. I can schedule my job. As you can see, I could do it once a day. I could do it periodically if you wanted to make sure if you had some more sensitive users than others, you could run these jobs, pretty often. Keeping in mind that you're creating network traffic every time that you're doing this. So, odds are, unless somebody's getting, very large attachments every 5 minutes, you're going to be tying up a little bit of network traffic anyway. And then the ability to run the job as, that first time when you click create. The beauty of this is I'm running this in Azure. It's going to Office 365. I'm creating network traffic that I'm going to pay for because it's Azure, but I'm not doing anything to my production network because I'm not, if I was on-prem, that'd be a different story and a consideration I have to take. But there's always a charge. You're either chewing up bandwidth on-prem that's going to impact production, or you're going to literally pay for the bandwidth that you're using in a third-party cloud. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel on this because we already have a job similar to this that's run. So now a couple of the scenarios that we've already talked about today. So I have this mailbox created called Veeam Demo. As you could see from when we did that, when we stepped through, you saw there was a Veeam Demo mailbox. So I have this mailbox, and I created this a couple weeks ago. And what I did in order to fill it up, the demo mailbox, I went out and did something that probably no sane person on the planet would do, and I signed them up for every mailing list that I could find so that the mailbox would get filled up. So if anybody wants to know what's going on with Taylor Swift, I have the information in here. When she's coming to your town, welcome to find out. But here's a very typical thing that somebody could do, and I'm just going to literally arbitrarily go through here.
I mean, is that the backup itself?
This is my production. I'm this user Veeam Demo. This is my email account.
Or that's your email account, but it's
my
not
production email account. It has been backed up. So basically, I used the same steps we just demoed to create a backup job prior that's been running for several days against these mailboxes. So now I'm in my production mailbox. I'm the worker named Veeam Demo, and I'm just doing dumb things now, and I'm highlighting all these mail items. And I'm going to go ahead. I just paid no attention to what I'm deleting. I'm going to go to my deleted items, and I'm going to permanently delete them. Gone. And I have no idea what I just deleted. So now this user, I'm going to call the help desk and say, I deleted a bunch of mail. I don't even know what I deleted. What can you do for me? How do I find it? Well, what do you need back? I don't even know. But I deleted it today. Well, what day is it from? I don't even know. What was it about? I don't know. I know nothing other than I have less email than I did 5 minutes ago. That's all I know. And for good measure, just so we can test this quickly, I'm going to delete a couple more right from the top line here so we can...
I can't breathe.
This is making you upset. Okay, so I've deleted a bunch of email. Couldn't tell you what any of it is. So now what do I do? I called the help desk. I gave them my sob story of, I have the fattest fat fingers ever, and I just deleted a bunch of stuff I never should. Well, okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to explore my latest exchange state as of Tuesday. I could also pick other points in time. So I could use my latest, or if you look here, I have multiple days that I could pull these backups from. Hasn't run yet today, so I don't have one from today. But I set this up last week, so I have, 6 days worth of backups that I could pull from. Since I don't know what this person deleted, I'm going to have to use the latest available. Show items that have been deleted by the user. So these are items that are no longer present in the mailbox. So it's going to, what we can do, this is part of your e-discovery process. I'm not even going to click those right now. I'm just going to use the latest. It's going to pop open our Veeam Explorer, which gives us the ability to look at the restore for these users. So here's Veeam demo, and you were asking about what items can I restore. There's the list of what I can restore. So there is an archive. So if I had an archive, I could pull it from there. So there's an answer for you right there. Excuse me. So for right now, I'm only going to focus on the inbox for this user because I know that they deleted stuff from the inbox. But, okay. There's 35 items listed here. I have no idea what those items are.
Can I do search parameters, search date by date parameters?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you can match any sort of criteria you wanted to in here.
That's from the administrative side, right?
From the administrative side. This is all for the administrative side. So I could do date, time, so I could do sent, received, anything that you could sort your mail on, I could search your mail on. But this user has given me nothing to go on. So that's useless to me because all I know is you deleted some mail. Well, here's a great thing that we have with our latest version of the
emails we're talking about Hotmail, right? I mean, the corporate.
No, this was in Office 365.
Right. That's the only thing you can work on right now. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yes. Well, we could do on-prem Exchange. This is for corporate email solutions from Microsoft.
So with the Slack stuff, I mean, I don't know, it's actually integrated with the 365.
Slack?
Yeah.
Slack is Cisco, so it's probably not going to. Okay. That Teams is Microsoft's answer to Slack.
So if in that case, Slack and other ones like that, they have some integrations with Teams. Content is in Teams.
That's the issue.
And then
from the Slack is in team-related information, including email stuff. Just just go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Teams is a wrapper.
Yeah.
For other stuff. So anything that's in Teams, the Teams backends are actually Skype for Business and SharePoint. That's where the majority of the information for Teams is stored. Then you have the third-party apps that you add in that are for Office 365. But at the end of the day, it's storing it in a SharePoint site that's masked by the front end that you use for Teams. So you can restore it from that aspect.
Okay.
So can you guys?
We could back it up through the sites. There's really nothing right now that's doing
The conversation aspect.
Yeah. Well, that would be part of the Skype engine.
What about like the channel conversations?
A great question. Because I think these are the things that, in my opinion, Microsoft has not thought completely through. Skype is done. These are the things that when they announced it a couple of years ago, I went, okay, good.
Because I mean, we integrate with SharePoint, so obviously the SharePoint aspect is completely backed up already. However, the conversation part of it is, if someone were to come to me and say, I need this employee who no longer works here, I need to know what they were saying.
Yeah, so what we've historically done in the past, even just on the plain Microsoft side, is force conversation history inside of Outlook. And then it would feed a message inside of Outlook for conversation history, put retention tags and all that stuff like we spoke about earlier on that. But once it's conversation history in Outlook, you use the same Veeam.
Right, and here's that.
And you could do that with
which we have today with
okay.
yeah. So there you go, and that's the I was just going to say. Thank you. We're thinking the same way.
Yeah.
Okay. But these are a lot of things that they have not made clear.
No.
In this transition from Skype to Teams.
So I have a question.
Sure.
In this scenario, you're restoring for a specific user with a specific problem.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I said we have no backup is because we have 50 board members who are using their personal emails to do city business.
Oh.
Exactly. But that mostly happened because there were people who were not technologists at the table making the decisions, assuming that that was actually more secure, which is mind-blowing to me. So what I'd like to see is a more secure model, which would have everybody on Office 365. The board staff, there's 3 members that are on, the Do-It platform and working in that fashion. However, all of our communications, even our personal emails that we are using, are foilable, which means the Freedom of Information covers that. Yeah. So it's not an ideal setup. In the event that we integrate everybody onto Office 365 and we realize 5 years ago someone was having some communications and it's had this impact, but we have no idea where that may have been. 50 members,
right?
All in flux over the course of
Some join and leave.
people get appointed and unappointed.
Yeah.
Is there a function to be able to look for specific types of data?
Yes.
Text, et cetera?
Yes. So, provided it's all in there. I mean, that's the first thing. We can't look through consumer-based systems, so we're not going to be able to look through your Hotmails and AOL.
No. But like if we did have everybody on
If you
there.
had everybody on here, absolutely, and you needed something, you could do an e-discovery so that you could find exact things based on phrases, names, dates, project names, things like that. So you could do that within this product.
So we talked about like the classifications and retention, right? So now in the Microsoft world where we're doing, you're setting retention based off of a classification, and Microsoft also is unifying their classifications for Exchange as well as AIP. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, your information.
So now if we have a classification system in Office 365, can you search your backups based upon Microsoft's classification system?
Do not know those tags with this data.
Yeah.
I think that's the trick. I think I think that those tags are separate. You could, in this version, I don't believe that there is tagging. Those are things, again, that are always going to be coming out. And that would be something that would extend the tags. Because I know within our main platform, tagging is an option.
Yeah.
Office 365, I haven't seen it in action yet.
Okay.
Good question, though. So we still have our poor person here who deleted a bunch of stuff that they have no idea what it is. Mr. Veeam Demo. So here's what we can do very simply. I don't know what I did. Well, let's compare it with production. So I'm looking at last night's backup. Trying to connect to production enumeration of box. If I used the right account, my apologies.
And this would work with any global admin account.
There are specific permissions that need to be set beyond what the admin have to begin with. So this Eric account that I'm using is the one that I set up the Office 365 tenant with, but I still had to go in and do a few more steps that are quick and straightforward, documented in the product documentation as well. I mean, if it took me an hour, I don't even think it took me an hour. I think it took me longer just because a couple of the screenshots I was going off of, since they changed the interface constantly, no 365 didn't look the same. So it took me an extra second to find a couple of things in there. You know, these things happen. So I'll go ahead and highlight our inbox and compare it to production. And you'll notice that not only do I get a list of absolutely everything that's in the backup, I get a list of the state of it. So if it's blank, it's in both places. If it's not, it says deleted or moved. We have the ability then to go through. I'm going to highlight by being deleted or moved. And I am going to highlight all of these and say, okay, here's the things you deleted. I'm going to put them back into your mailbox. So I literally just click there. Starts to run. Done. Now, granted, that was only 6 items, and none of them have attachments. It's pretty much text, so I would expect it to go that fast. But if I go back out here, here's those items again. These are the first few that I deleted this morning, the skim, the daily beast. Everything's back in the inbox as if the person never did anything. So I'll do a real quick demo on OneDrive as well. So the same user has a OneDrive account. Now let's say I'm such a screw up, I messed up all my email, I quit. So now I have my OneDrive here that's full of data. I'm going to go ahead and move it to, what happened is I left. It's been 6 months. Maybe there's a project that I'm working on that I need to be able to, my manager now needs access to. So the manager calls and says, oh, I need all the files from so-and-so for that, from this project that we used to work on. I'm going to choose a point in time, and it's going to pretend at that point in time from last, let's just say Sunday, but it could have been from 6 months ago, could have been from 8 months ago. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to explore the OneDrive that we have here to show these items. Excuse me. So these items will come up. I'll be able to see a list of whatever was in that OneDrive as of perhaps, the user's last day, or the last time it was backed up, maybe 30 days after they left. I go in here, I go to my friend Veeam demo, and I see a bunch of items in here. Oh, what were they? Well, they were these Word documents with these weird names. I'm going to go ahead and just pick that. And you know what? I'll send you the PDFs just in case they're both, any of them are any different. I'm going to go ahead and, instead of, I can't restore them back to the same place because the OneDrive no longer exists. The person's been gone for 6 months. I could save them out and put them on a file share, or nice and easy, I could send them to the user. So now I just took those 4 documents, restored them, sent them in an email. I go out, bear with me while I find that email account. And look at that, they're already there. So I have this inbox, I have it in my inbox already, those documents that I needed from that project, from a user who's no longer with the company, sent to the people who are actively working on the project today.
We have one other question. So Matt was asking, when you were showing the compare reduction portion, he said he saw that it said move or deleted, which you sorted them by. But for the move portion, is there any way to drill down deeper and see, like, if the user did move it, where did they move it to, or anything like that?
I don't believe so, unless you knew what you were looking for as a name, because you're not going to know. If the user knows the name, yes, absolutely. If the user doesn't know the name or any sort of criteria about the files, like, or the emails, like we did in our demo, then no, I'm not going to be able to know if they moved it. So they may end up with duplicates. Maybe they did just move it to a folder that they could have done that, so now they may have duplicates in their inbox. But as fast as that is to restore, is it worth that, or spending a half hour with them trying to explain, well, go through each folder, look for the emails. I don't know what they, if you don't know what they are, you're never going to find them anyway. Restore them into the inbox. That way they know where they are.
So, okay, he said thank you.
Okay, great. You're very welcome. All right, I'm going to hand the screen back over to you.
All right, yeah, so as we transition now, so that the first part was all on Office 365. And we saw from the mail perspective, quite easy, administrator friendly to backup, restore, item level, search, all of those things. Again, in the Microsoft world, it's really all about policy-driven ways to manage those things. So before we go into the second topic, which is going to be around Azure components, does anyone have any other Office 365 mail, SharePoint, or OneDrive questions? All right. So, all right. So I'll share out my desktop again. And then you could just, yeah. Okay. So I think some people, when they say, like, oh, when you look at Microsoft strategy, and you can see there's a very clear difference in the way Veeam thinks about or leverages backup as opposed to Microsoft. Microsoft is this policy-driven methodology, and then Veeam is a real, thought-out backup solution. And Microsoft, they're not trying to do that. When we talk about the Azure pieces, you're going to see a similar trend. Microsoft theory for backup inside of Azure falls along the same lines. It's not really the idea of doing backups. It's about building systems in different ways that are not your traditional backup type way, but then to give you a platform where you could go ahead and build a backup system or integrate with a backup provider in order to accomplish what you're traditionally used to, right? So not to spend a tremendous amount of time on the cloud or reasons for moves to cloud services, but lots of organizations people are adopting it faster than just about any technology, and the use of public and private clouds is growing exponentially year over year, and all the numbers and all those things show that, right? So, but the transition there is really going in line with a hybrid-based transition, right? We don't use just Azure Active Directory or just some other cloud directory. We use on-premise Active Directory integrated into that. We don't have just storage. We have cloud storage and on-premise storage. We don't have just on-premise databases or just cloud databases. Typically, we have ones that feed each other. This presents issue with backup specifically because now we have an on-premise backup methodology that we have to account for and a cloud backup methodology that we have to account for as well. And those systems may or may not be the same system, and we might design systems differently. And in the Microsoft world, for Azure specifically, their backup solutions, again, are more of thinking about putting your things inside of Azure in a different way, so you're not really relying on backups in a traditional sense, right? So even inside of Microsoft's long-term strategy for moving people to cloud, most people will start with putting backups inside of Azure or taking your virtual machines and putting them to Azure. But after that, the rest of their strategy is to get people to deconstruct those things, put them into Microsoft PaaS or SaaS services, and rebuild code or rebuild items all the way down to code level that inherently take advantage of cloud components. When we're doing that, the idea of saying, okay, well, back up this virtual machine goes away, right? And then so Microsoft is not investing in helping you to back up a virtual machine. They are investing in helping you to rip out the idea of infrastructure entirely from your organization, get all the way down to the business level applications and codes that you use, have those natively built into cloud services in Azure, and then anything that is a backup is really handled by them, right? And that's where this we need to also then plan for and think about the idea of what Microsoft sees as backup and what they see as these other forms, right? Microsoft wants to focus on high availability and disaster recovery, right? The idea is that you're building systems that have no single points of failure, so you don't have to back up single points, and that those systems are spread out geographically across different regions of the world, so that if you have more catastrophic failures, there's no single point of failure, and then whatever you did need to, for any specific data points that does need to be maintained and you did need to restore it, you do have backup and restore capabilities of just that, right? And that's the idea that Microsoft has for organizations. And this is, if we think about companies that like today that are born in the cloud, organizations that are just being built today where new companies are just starting out, a lot of them are being born in the cloud. A lot of them are foregoing infrastructure entirely, and their idea of backup is very different. So, so when we look at, which everyone should be pretty familiar with, this shared responsibility model for cloud services, the idea of what Microsoft handles versus what you handle, right, starts to move more and more on Microsoft's side for moving over towards that SaaS application, right? So as you have less dealings with actual virtual machines, less server operating system environments, then you would care less about backing up that infrastructure and care less about backups, right? Also, again, Microsoft's long-term. So, so when planning for these items, specifically around resiliency, so Microsoft's idea is that you would put things in different regions and have pairs and stage components of your infrastructure in these different availability regions so that if one thing goes down, you have load balancing across multiple areas or hot, cold, and those things would fail over, right? Microsoft has technologies like Azure Site Recovery or geo-redundant storage to facilitate those types of things. in a very idealistic world, these are very elegant solutions. The issue is that not everything is the ideal, right? Sometimes we just have an application that runs on this server, and that's how it needs to be, right? So, so with that, Microsoft is also not really, delusional about that. We can still take a server, have it in one region, have it replicate to another region, and then in the case of a failover, some type of event, whether it's a fat fingering, as we say, right, or it is a more catastrophic event like water damage inside of a data center, then you do have that resiliency. You have another copy of that machine in another region to come online when that machine experiences some problem in your primary location, right? So build everything with resiliency, and when you build 2 copies of everything, you're using twice as much Azure, and then Microsoft is happy.
That's the key thing.
Right?
Everything is a great idea, and it immediately dispels the fallacy that the cloud is cheaper.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when people have that conversation. I never watching a conversation and someone's like, "Oh, okay, the cloud is going to save you money," and the first answer is, "No, it's not." Right? It's just not. So it's not about saving you money. It is about giving you more flexibility, versatility, building your you can build a 7 nines solution inside of Azure, which on-prem, if you wanted to build to that many 9s, that would cost you a fortune. And if you wanted to build to that many 9s in Azure, that's where it's not really cost savings, but it's a way for you to achieve a higher level of enterprise-grade productivity at a less cost. That's a better way to think about it.
Absolutely.
Not in, oh, I'm going to take this as it is and run it in the cloud, and it's going to save me money. One of the other part for when we're talking about resiliency, it is the idea also that we are not planning for and buying today for max usage of tomorrow, right? We don't buy systems that we are going to plan for the biggest possible usage of them in the future. And then again, that plays into back, and then having to back all those things up and make sure that those things are and yes, dedupe technology and all those things has helped with that, but Microsoft's idea is go smaller, scale out horizontally, right? Use things like these things called VM scale sets. Have code that can be load balanced across individual machines that can scale out when needed and only when needed. This simplifies your backup solutions. This simplifies the way in which you can scale or burst, and this is all part of Microsoft's resiliency methodology, right? But there will come a point still where you do have to back things up, right? Like I said, there's going to be operating system environments, SQL databases, NoSQL databases, other forms of structured and unstructured data that you're going to need to simply back up due to compliance reasons, fear of corruption, crypto virus attacks because people let some type of security breach happen in their environment. And yes, I said let because it's typically people let it happen through failure to adopt proper security protocols. So there are still backup components that you can leverage. You can leverage agents that sit inside of operating system environments or that directly integrate into Azure systems in order to back up traditional disk-based virtual machines. One of the questions that we get asked a lot is like, okay, well, let's say I'm like halfway between where I'm like I have a machine inside of the East Coast of Azure and I'm having it replicated to West Coast, and even though that one is replicating, I want to take snapshots of the replication and store those, right? Because you would think like, oh, that would be a great solution. You get the best of both worlds. Well, you can't do that with native Azure technologies at this time. So this is just also playing into that idea of these things working together. So you could imagine the left side being something like the East Coast and then the right side being something like the West Coast, right? And this is planning for geographic resiliency as well as backup and as well as giving the ability for your machines to fail over. On the right side, on the, let's say, West Coast, you would have items that are already pre-staged. And here you could have backups that are either replicated over or just straight replication to have content locally stored. Oh, it does have things, East and Central, fine. So, you could have content that's locally stored in alternate regions just waiting there in the case of some type of disaster, right? So this way, if a machine from east fails over to central, when it fails over, it has localized content waiting for it already, right? So again, not so much of having like a traditional backup, but the idea is having content replicated to other regions, and then should some type of incident happen, you're able to get back up and running in minutes rather than having time to restores or time to go live that are days and 48-hour type of intervals, right? And one of the other parts too is like not even just having those items replicated to other regions. You can do traditional type backups when they integrate into Microsoft technology as well, right? So you can directly integrate to your SQL server, have SQL backups from on-prem pushed natively into cloud storage, and have 15 minutes RPOs on things like that. All right, so again, the backup strategy is more of a way of looking at the cloud differently, right? It's saying let's build for high availability, resiliency, and backup for the data and content where it makes sense. And let's plan for not even just the worst case scenario, but plan for any scenario. And sometimes, again, it's difficult when you say, okay, I have this 3-tier application and I'm converted into all these cloud services in order to get all this beautiful bells and whistles. If I have a 3-tier application and I want it to run in Azure and I just want to back up the 3-tier application as it is, that's where these complexities start to rear their head, and where, again, Microsoft encourages third parties like Veeam to come in and assist. So, back to you.
Thanks. So the, everything that's been described here, it works, and it's a great model, but it can be summed up a lot of times in 2 words: expensive rewrite. It is absolutely a great way to do things, but it is not something that people can necessarily do quickly or affordably, and may take many years. So you're still going to have those multi-tier applications, those server-based applications around for a very long time. So what I'm going to share with you is a little bit of information about how we can utilize Azure for backup, storage, and for recovery. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about some of the other things that we can do. So what I'm not showing you today, but I will describe because it's really no different than doing it on-prem, is we can back up and restore Azure servers. We can back up Azure servers and restore the files back into Azure servers today using our Veeam agent for Windows. We have a more elegant solution that we acquired from another company that works on another cloud platform that goes usually by a 3-letter acronym. And that platform, we have the ability then to natively pull in VMs and back them up completely, so that you could take that VM, you could move it to on-prem, you could move it to Azure. Those features are coming very soon to Azure. So I didn't cover that today because I have no information on it, other than I can tell you it's coming very soon. It's going to give us even more integration into Azure. It just happens the company we acquired started on the other platform first, and now those same features. And I have every confidence it's going to come soon, especially after the announcement this morning that we just received a $500 million investment. So I have a feeling developers are typing twice as fast this morning after hearing that news. They know that more and more help is coming. So those are all very good things right there. We're still a privately held company, just got a $500 million investment, and I already know that one, if I heard correctly, and don't hold me to it, by the time there's leaves on the trees again, that Azure functionality I described should be out. Hopefully that's the case, because what that does is gives you the ability to do exactly what you described. You can there's still no way, if it's servers, we could work with it. There's still no way to back up within the services within Azure. That's still, you're beholden to Azure to back those up no matter what.
Where's your software development team then? I know that your corporate headquarters in Switzerland is kind of small, so.
It's in Europe as well. Most of it is Russian. Most of them, the headquarters being in Switzerland, actually a lot of them work out of Switzerland as well. So it's the European-based development for the most part. We're mainly sales and engineering. in the U.S. So let's talk a little bit about our new feature, Veeam Cloud Archive. If you haven't used our product or aren't familiar, we have an update coming out right now. Veeam Backup Recovery, Veeam Availability Suite 9.5, Update 4 is going to be officially announced on January 22nd. The release to manufacturer happened, I think, 3 days before New Year's. So I actually, in the lab here, I have the release software that I'm going to show you demos on. Excuse me, for this feature, because this feature is a new feature in Update 4. So the challenge that folks have with backups is anybody still using tape here in the room to maintain the backups to any sort of long-term archive tape? Good for you. But you're doing disk to disk to disk to disk to disk, and you probably have disk somewhere that's still more expensive than what you want to spend.
Outsourcing during sort of exactly. They would be doing that automatically.
If you're outsourcing,
they don't consider the long-term storage in today's world.
Exactly.
I work at data center something. I know how that operation works.
Tape's probably never going to die, but if you want to get a little closer to, if you want to make it wheeze a little bit more, you're going to want to be able to use. There's extremely cheap long-term storage available out in the cloud. The problem is, how do you access it? How do you maintain the systems that you have today and continue to use it? So you're always looking for some place that you can cheaply store long data for long term. And by a show of hands, whose data set shrinks? Anyone? No? Ever? No? Didn't think so. I'm just going to take your word for it, the folks on the phone, that your data set has never shrunk. So enter Veeam Cloud Archive. So what this is, it's an archive tier feature of our scale-out backup repository that's available in our Enterprise Plus platform that facilitates moving those older backups, based on older defined by you, to cheaper storage such as cloud or other on-prem object-based storage, S3 compatible storage. For the demos today, we're going to show you how to use it with Azure Blob. So what it does is it actually takes your backups that you've already done to disk to disk. Has anybody heard of the 3-2-1 rule for backups before? No. So the 3-2-1 rule for backups is you should always have 3 copies of your data, 2 different types of media, 1 of them off-site. So in the case of using a tape, you have 3 disks. You have your production copy, you have a disk copy, you have a tape copy. There's your 3 copies of your data.
But the tape copies is very long-term archive data.
And that's your 1 copy that goes off-site because you're not storing the tapes on top of the rack where you're getting that from. So that's your 3-2-1. Sometimes you could also do it so that you could have a local copy on disk right next to it, and you could run those same backup jobs and do a backup copy job that sends a copy to a data center you have on the West Coast, perhaps. Bottom line is, it's multiple copies of the data in different locations, and one of them has to be definitely off-site and considered more of a long-term solution, like you were saying. Yes.
That's a question.
Sure.
So the Veeam Cloud Archive.
Yes.
Where are your facilities based?
This is not our facilities.
It's not your facilities.
No, this is your facilities, and I'll show you that. So it's your Azure, or your Amazon, or your S3 compatible, like a Cloudian device, or something like that you're using as that object-based storage.
Okay. It's not going to a Veeam data center in Switzerland or somewhere else.
We don't do hardware. All we do is software. So there are third parties that provide services like that, Veeam Cloud service providers, that could use their own storage. They could use cloud-based storage that you would contract with to hold those long-term services with. So that's an option as well. But if you want to manage it all yourself and use this cheaper storage, this is the way to do it. So what happens is, as far as Veeam is concerned, it doesn't even know that those files are in the cloud. Its retention policies are handling moving that data around. But from the way when your Veeam backup software looks at it, it sees the metadata of those backups, and then it just knows there's pointers in there so that it reads it and goes, okay, I need a restore from a month ago. It starts pulling it, but it actually, behind the covers, is pulling out from Azure and pulling that data back in for the restore job. So the way you'll notice is it probably takes a little longer than if it was on the disk array sitting right next to the backup system. So I'm going to walk you through how we would set that up, and there's not really a lot of action to see because of what I just described. The software is pretty smart in that It doesn't even need to know that that's what's going on. Let me see. This is where I want to be. So what I'll do is this is our Veeam Backup and Replication console, and it's running our most current update 4. So what we have in here, if we look at our backup infrastructure, we have our scale-out backup repository. So I've created one in here called Sober One. We call them Sober for short. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the properties, which is the same as going through an initial setup. So the first thing that I need to do in order to do a setup for a Sober is I need to create repository. So the first thing that I've done is I've created a repository I've called one Sober Local. So this is just local disk that's actually attached to this machine that I'm running. And again, if I go through here, you can see how I set this up. I'm picking the local server. You can see that it already has that. If I populate this, it shows you what's available disk-wise for this server. I'm not going to make any changes to this. Right now it's storing to the R drive, which is a large drive. It's going to put the backups in the backup folder. The settings here have to do with the performance of the system. That's nothing that I'm just taking the defaults at this point. Mount server, I only have one in here. The mount server would be used if I were going to do instant restore, and it would be running off the compute of the mount server, or the file level restore. It's going to use the compute off of that to mount the files from that backup so that I can browse them and pull out what files I need. Just taking the defaults again within this environment. And that's literally all it takes to set up a local repository. So now I'm going to exit this because I've already set it up. But that gives us a local repository, step 1. Step 2 is to go in and create the Azure component of it as well. So it's its own repository as well. But I can't directly back up to the Azure repository. So I'm going to go ahead and I gave it its name. I've set up accounts in here prior. If you go out, if I look at my, I'm sorry, I have to pick the right. So if I go out here, I already have created a storage account in my Azure account called Veeam Sober, and I've used the information for the access keys and the account name to connect to this within Veeam already. I'm just using those same credentials here that I've already put in. Now, you can do multiple things here. So the lowest I could set the object storage consumption to was 1 terabyte, because really if this is long-term storage, why would you want less than that? So I could either cap it based on how I'm setting up these backup jobs, or I could have it unlimited so that it just keeps growing and growing and growing. Object storage has no limits within Azure. I set it to 1 terabyte because I'm paying for this out of my own pocket, and I don't want to back up these. You saw what's in these mailboxes and these servers. I don't want to pay for that. And that's it. That's the extent of what it takes to set up the Azure repository. Now I've set these two up. They're not together in any way. They're still two separate ones. I'm going to go ahead and I don't want to hit finish on that because I've already done it. Now I go into the scale-out backup repository, and I set this up. Again, I'm just using the name that I have here. So for performance, you notice there's two different tiers in here. Performance tier, that's your local disk, more direct, fast storage. You'll notice we also have a capacity tier. That's where the object-based storage, the Azure storage, comes into play. So we have two different ways we can do it. So you can either get the data to the fastest place possible, so it's going to go to the most, the fastest disk available at the time of the backup within this, because you can have more than one performance tier in there. I could have 5 or 6 different servers. I can take different types of storage, combine them together into one repository, and Veeam will be the brains that figures out where the data needs to go. For the sake of this, I just have the one. So now we set up the capacity tier. So within the capacity tier, we have the ability, as soon as I select Extend Scale Out a Backup Repository, that enables the Azure. Go ahead and I choose from the drop down the Azure blob I've already set up. I can set up the age out limit. Typically, it defaults to 30 days, and that's probably about right. You would want to keep 30 days locally so that you could do fast restores of your data. This is, again, long-term storage. Maybe you have different policies. I set it to 1 because I needed it to do some things in order to show that it's actually working. I would never recommend you use 1 day as your move-out period. You notice you have the ability to encrypt the storage as it goes out as well. So there's another component for your regulatory requirements within this. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because that's all the configurations. Oh, there is one override, and I thought this was a great one as well. It's kind of can save you if you're resource constricted. You can move the oldest files out if you're running out of storage on your primary storage, your performance tier storage. It can move them out faster. We don't have that problem based on what I'm doing today. So that's how we set up the scale-out backup repository to use that object-based storage as well. Now, if I go back up and look at my jobs, I apologize because I had this tagged and now I can't find it. It does show where it runs the job periodically within the backup infrastructure to move. You can see it says it's using 0 gig, but it doesn't know what it's using because it's not really managing what's using out in that. So it's always going to show up as 0 bytes. There is a spot in here where it can show when it runs that job. I'm just not finding it at the moment, and like I said, I had it tagged, but it's being a new feature. It's still something that we're still familiarizing ourselves with. I'm not going to spend any more time looking for that, though, but it does show you when it runs, and you could look through the logs and see when it runs those, runs out and copies that data out to Azure. So that's all it takes to set up that cloud archive. Now, at this point, you just run your backups. You set up your backup job to use the, I'll just show you, I have a backup job here. This demo backup job too. It couldn't be easier to set up because now we have our repository set up. I'm literally we'll just run through the demo back, setting up a single backup here. We add a VM to it real quick.
And the VMs could be Azure VMs or on-premise?
It could be, this is for on-prem only right now until we have that other component. It could be if you have your infrastructure connected together and the Windows agent installed on those Azure VMs, then yes, they would be included in this, as long as the infrastructures were tied together.
And how about AWS?
Same thing for AWS. The N2WS, which is the name of the product that we have, ties in a different way, but it can use the same repository, so then they would show up in this screen as well. But you can do the same thing with it, as long as you're running, because at that point it's treating it as if it was a physical machine.
And
because you're running the, what's that?
And Google?
Same thing, same thing. I mean, but yeah, you could, as long as you can put an agent on the guest operating system, it will back it up. Yeah. And we have agents for Windows, Linux, and it's actually released yet. AIX is.
And this system has to see the agent, so as long as
you have network connectivity of some sort. You have to have a little bit of infrastructure in whatever that cloud service is in order to facilitate communications.
VPN or Express Route or whatever.
Exactly that, and then probably some sort of a Veeam proxy server on the far side as well to handle the workload. So we add a VM real quick. And you can see right here, I can pick my backup. So the default backup repository is one that I don't know what I said, but Siri on my phone just thought I talked to her. So I just picked my scale-up backup repository, and everything is handled for me as far as the data lifecycle management within there. For restore points, you can hold the spot with that. Again, we were talking about you wanted to have multiple destinations for that job. You can set up a secondary destination, but usually you would handle that. Instead of slowing down these jobs, you would want to set up a backup job, which would be a faster way of moving that data than trying to do 2 backups at once, essentially. Guest processing is if you want to be able to do a file-based search within a VM, or if it's an Exchange server that you need, or a SQL server that you need to be able to get in and get actual database files or log files out of. Schedule your job and you're done. So I mean, it's that easy once you set up that Azure repository within your scale-out backup repository. Again, this is a feature that's update 4. It's coming out third week of this next week. My goodness, where did January go? It's coming out next week, and it's something that also requires the Enterprise Plus version edition of our software. So real quick then, so that covers the Veeam Cloud Archive. The other way that we can do this is if you need a VR point. So sometimes the most expensive part of if you're backing up on-prem, you're backing up these traditional 3-tier apps is where are you going to run them once you've backed them up if you need to, if you have a disaster. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Disaster is just one component of what you would need to do. So why would you want, there's 4 basic reasons people use Azure or any cloud service to facilitate DR. Typically faster because you can either have some of that infrastructure built and shut off within the cloud service. It's cheaper because you only pay for what you use, so it's not like building a second data center. The days of building the full second data center are waning fast. As the hardware vendors will tell you, they're not selling double the hardware they used to anymore. And it relieves, especially, this is something large companies are doing it, small companies are doing it. When it comes to DR, smaller companies used to think that they just couldn't afford to do it. They would just have to hope for the best because they couldn't afford those second data centers. They couldn't do anything like that. Now with the cloud, true DR is available for everyone. So we're going to talk a little bit about our direct restore to Microsoft Azure. So basically anything we can back up with the products that you see on the screen here. So our Veeam Backup for Replication, Veeam Backup Free Edition. So we have a free edition that you can do some basic work with on individual computers. It doesn't have a centralized console, so you could back up your laptop and restore it to Azure in theory, as long as it's on anything that's in a Veeam repository can be restored to Azure. And another product, I'm just sharing the information about it with you, but it's we're not going to demo it today. VeeamPN for Azure. What this allows for is quick and easy networking in the event of that disaster to connect together a site or connect together users, home offices, remote offices, quickly and easily, creating this VeeamPN hub server that then the gateways in your production environment would connect to, and your end users and smaller sites would be able to do a site-to-site or an individual site, point-to-site VPN to connect into that Azure infrastructure and tie together maybe you're doing only a partial DR, maybe your entire data center isn't down. Now you can communicate with Azure, the main office, and your end users can be wherever and continue to work. So I'm going to show you a demo of restoring a VM to Azure. So I have, again, we go back to our backup console, our Veeam Backup Recovery console, and if I look at my backup jobs, what I'm running here, just so you, in case you're wondering what infrastructure I'm running this on, this is VMware. So I'm running these multiple servers I have available on this VMware environment, but I've chosen Azure as my restore platform. So I go into this job again. I'm just going to pick a nice little server here that I want to restore. And you notice when I right click, I have a lot of options for where I can restore this server to or what I can do with it. So I could, if I do instant VM recovery, that's where I'm using other infrastructure to quickly, from the backup files, stand up that server. It minimizes my downtime in the event of a single server disaster. I could restore the entire VM back to its original location. I could restore disks. I could pull out individual files out of that VM. Could pull out, again, you have the ability to get guest files out of it based on the infrastructure or the OS version that it's built on. And I have the ability to restore it to cloud services. Azure Service has been in product now for 2 years, so it's a proven restore method And restoring it is as simple as this. Again, I've already put in my credentials for my Azure account. So I'm going to pick my Visual Studio Enterprise. You can pick any location you want that's part of Azure, the public Azure anyway. You've noticed that there's not anything in here for the government or anything like that. This is just for the public Azure. I'm going to use a proxy VM, which is basically the same server that I'm already on. It's the server I'm sitting on. So this proxy VM is going to handle some of the work, the processing that's required in order to restore this server. Now you notice here I have to select the size of this server. And the trick with this is the size of the server makes a difference in how much you're going to spend in Azure. So you need to make sure that out of all these versions of servers available, that you know which one you're picking and why. Not something that if you're typically been a Hyper-V or a VMware administrator, you're not used to doing that. So you need to, you or whoever is going to be working with you on this needs to be educated on what these different versions are for, because they all have different purposes, be it for database servers. It could be high processing, high memory, floating point operations. There's lots of different reasons to pick different ones. I like the A0 for demo purposes because it is the cheapest. I don't need to have, you know, multiple disks and multiple processors and half a terabyte of memory on a server to prove my point here. So I'm going to go ahead and just pick the cheapest one that I have here. You would want to right size that for your, and probably know ahead of time what all these are going to map to so that you're not trying to make these decisions in the middle of being panicked about your system being down. Pick the storage count that you have configured already for your, excuse me, that you already have configured based on your Azure configuration. Go ahead and click next. Select a resource group. This is where this is a way of organize that Azure uses to organize resources together so that and how they work together within Azure. So I can either create a new resource group or I can put it into an existing one. I'm going to put in one I already have built called VeeamPN that if the system I was on allowed me to communicate properly, I'd be showing you how VeeamPN works today, but there's some network issues, so I'm not sharing that with you today. I want to make sure you were aware of the concept though. So I'm going to pick VeeamPN. Click next. You have multiple options for network here. Typically, I'm going to pick, it would make no sense. I could put it in VeeamPN, but then put it in another network. I'm actually going to keep it in the same network. You can have multiple networks per resource group, and you can have multiple subnets. So I'm going to keep it on the defaults here. And I can either keep the security group empty, and it will create a new one as it goes, or I can put it into one that I already have built. Based on, and again, you'd be working with your security team, so you would know which of these security groups each of these should go into. I'm just going to pick a winner there because at the end of the day it doesn't matter. You can document your restore reasons right within the right within here as well. And I'm ready to restore. I hit finish, and the job kicks off. And it's going to take anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes because remember it has to copy this data from the local backup repository out to Azure. There's a conversion that has to happen on that server because it's not in an Azure native format, so it's going to do a conversion after it copies it so that then it can be stood up and run in Azure. So other than seeing all these checkboxes go green, that's the demo for anybody that wants to, doesn't believe me, you can stick around and certainly wait to see that. But I'm going to go ahead and hand back over because that's the end of my presentation for. Is there anything? Do you need the screen back?
Well, I don't think there isn't anything else to really present, right? So we wanted to cover those areas, right? Back up with these two different Microsoft platforms and how Veeam enhances both those platforms. So obviously, definitely bringing a lot of robust traditional backup capabilities there. So I guess, does anyone have any questions, or does anyone else on the line have any questions about the Azure portion, or even back about the Office 365 portion?
was going to ask, you went to VMware to really deal with the servers directly. Do they use Couchbase or any other platform beyond VMware?
The ones that we can directly plug into today are VMware, Hyper-V, and Nutanix, HV. So anything beyond that, it would have to be the agent installed inside the guest OS. So if you run a Windows or Linux and install that agent, then we would just treat it as if it's the same as a physical server. You wouldn't, so there would be different quiescence and snapshotting that would have to happen as opposed to when you do it in VMware, Hyper-V, or Nutanix. It works with the hypervisor. Take a quick snap of that server, run your backups, release the production. So those are the big three that we're working with today. And again, from a cloud perspective, Azure, the additional features are on the way out to end users sometime this spring. And again, we work with the other one as well if you so choose. And here's the beauty of all of this is something I didn't cover is if you're looking to set up a test dev environment, what I'm doing right now is essentially that. I can take a backup of my production environment, store that out to an environment in Azure that's in no way connected to production, let my developers have access to it, and let them go to town. They destroy it, so be it. Delete everything and just restore it into Azure. They can test their updates. They can test their software on the live production data. It's also a great way to migrate if you wanted to permanently move workloads from your on-prem system out to the cloud.
Another question about we showed like backing up a machine or backing up data into Azure storage account.
Yes.
Now, you also mentioned running a secondary backup job after the first job in order to
Copy job.
The copy job.
Copies, yes.
So now, is it possible at this time for the secondary job to do the backup from Azure storage to another Azure storage in an alternate location with a cheaper storage set? So if we take the idea of Microsoft's cloud resiliency plan into effect and kind of try to fit this in where it would fall in line, we would back up the virtual machine to a one storage set, right,
Yep.
which would be locally redundant, right, so it's a lower cost in Azure consumption.
I'll show you. Well, we're doing it to object storage.
Okay.
So
Yep.
object's a little different.
So then we would and then once the backup has been completed into that storage, to back up from the one storage to the other storage in a different region with a lower cost associated with that one.
Let me show you how I have the storage set up.
Instead of, you understand what I'm saying, but
Right.
instead of having to go back to the virtual machine to back it up to the
Right.
copy.
Well, at that point, a lot of what you're doing, and especially this comes in, I think, even more on the Amazon side. You can. So I set up when I set up this repository to begin with, I set it up as cool storage. So I had options for how I could set it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I could, as long as it's object storage, I can get access to it. So I'm not sure how, I would probably, if I'm archiving it, my goal is to never touch this anyway, except because it's going to cost me more to touch it.
To pull it.
Pull it back out. But I set it up because it's cheaper and I know I'm not going to.
Yeah, you have cool locally redundant. Right?
Yes.
So.
And I had all those choices. So I don't know. Given the fact that you're thinking of this as a tape replacement in ways, so you're going to want to make a decision to move, because you can't use aging policies within Azure, just like, because people ask me all the time about this from an AWS perspective as well. Can I store this to Glacier?
Yeah, that's one of the.
Which is essentially what we're trying to get at. The answer is no today.
Mm-hmm.
You could do what is it, the S3, what is it, the S3 infrequent access. You could do that. You can't do Glacier. You could do Glacier in theory in that object.
Script to run.
You can, but then Veeam loses sight of it.
Yeah.
So you'd have to do a re-import. You'd have to pull that data back somehow, re-import it. So you're losing the elegance of the data of the backup system managing it when you do that. So in theory, yes.
The same thing with Azure. You could move
Exactly.
the cold storage with the script, but
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So you could script it out that way, but at that point you technically have it, but you don't really have insight into it. It's not part of your backup system anymore. It's going to show up as an error of some sort when you go to use it. And the problem is the system may still think it has it because it keeps all that metadata. So it will check to see if it's there. So you may get errors, or you may go to think you're going to do a backup and it's going to tell you can't, and then you have to figure out what you need to pull back from Glacier or cold storage in order to make that backup happen. Yeah, so and that could get expensive, and it's slow. Don't forget that it's not instantaneous. It can take several hours to pull data from those cold storage platforms.
Yeah, I was also thinking of another scenario where we have a, whatever N-tier application, and maybe one of the tiers is a file server set of file content. And if we're building across multi-region geo in Azure, right, we want to have a localized file server set that is cool, right, on the target side, right? So we use the instance recovery features of Veeam or ASR, right, so that machines are protected and they would fail over, right? We run a backup job to back up content, right, for the case of deletion or accidental deletion or whatever. But then we also want to have the cool set of file server content inside of the cold region also, or the cool region, right? So you could possibly use some type of that backup copy job to have that there, or you could use DFS replication if it's Windows servers. If it's not Windows servers, right, you can do script-based copies as well. But is there something inside of here that you can do that type of?
There's not today.
Okay. And that's what I'm talking, just straight like storage to storage type of replication.
Yeah, that's not there yet. If you're talking storage to storage replication, now you're probably talking more specified appliances, maybe like a Store Simple.
Store Simple can do it.
Yeah. But now you're probably talking something more like that, because now those pointers are still staying local on the Store Simple appliance, and then you're using your Azure policies to manage it behind the scenes, but it always knows the path to get to it. So as far as Veeam is concerned, it's always a local file. And again, we're just releasing the object-based storage this month. Yeah. The things you're talking about are going to continue to come in. That's part of what's going to come as the evolution of the product, is the ability to do those sorts of things. Because the first thing, it's kind of funny, there's sometimes you're like, and we can do object storage. Yeah. And can you go to Glacier? It's like, isn't anybody ever happy with what we can do? Yeah. It's like we haven't gotten it out the door yet. People are asking for stuff we aren't doing yet. So it's coming, because it's being. I've heard it asked so many times. It has to come. It just has that extra level of complexity, because that cold storage is not directly accessible. Okay.
Another way would be like the integration with like Azure Files, right? Specifically Azure Files. Yeah. Right, because then you could probably accomplish the same thing with it.
You could use something similar with a product we have called Veeam Cloud Connect Enterprise. That is the connector, and that builds into virtual servers and into block storage to do backups into Azure. That's the technology that the cloud service providers use, but it's available to enterprises as well. So again, now maybe, that might be something that might be more interesting for the file-based storage. It's a little more expensive because there's some horsepower involved, and there's also more expensive disk involved. Yeah. So there's options for it anyway. It's all about how you want to assemble it. There's a lot of pieces on the table. It's what are you going to build out of your set of Legos? Yeah.
All right. Well, if anyone has any other questions, I know we're just about at time. So if not, thank you all. Thank you for the people that joined remotely. We're going to end at least the call portion too. If you guys want to stick around and chat, happy to. If not, have a nice day.
And please make sure, if you haven't, to fill out the surveys as well. You got it. Thank you.